Chapter 22. The band was playing. The KGB file was in Moscow, which meant the CIA would have to run a high-risk operation to get it out. The operational plan called for Mr. Pym to retrieve the file from its hiding place and pass it to the CIA. This was no simple undertaking. When the KGB was dismantled in 1991, a month before the collapse of the Soviet Union, its successor agency in the Russian Federation was divided into two parts: the SVR, responsible for foreign spying, and the FSB, which handled internal security and surveillance. In Moscow, the FSB took over the job of the KGB's former Second Chief Directorate. With heavy FSB surveillance of CIA officers operating out of the American Embassy in Moscow, the handoff had to take place with extreme caution. Under no circumstances could either Mr. Pym or the CIA officer who met him clandestinely be caught in the act, and the FSB had eyes everywhere. Espionage is not all James Bond glamour. The KGB man had hidden the file in his mother's garage. It had been sitting in that prosaic hiding place for 5 years. Elaborate, detailed arrangements were made so that the file could safely be extracted from its hiding place, passed to the CIA, and sent on its way to FBI headquarters in downtown Washington. The first task of the CIA officer designated to meet Mr. Pym was to evade surveillance. The officer might dry clean himself by driving around the streets of Moscow for hours to try to throw off any followers. He might switch cars or go on foot part of the time, ducking in and out of department stores and alleyways. A more elaborate trick the CIA sometimes used was to have the clandestine officer switch places with someone in the embassy, perhaps a low-level employee, even a workman, whom the FSB agents did not ordinarily bother to follow. The CIA officer would be dressed like the other employee, and a skilled makeup artist would change his face to closely resemble his double. The plan called for the handoff to take place in Moscow on August 4th, 2000. If for any reason it failed, Mr. Pym and his CIA contact were to try again 1 month later, on September 4th. Their work done, Rochford suggested it was time to celebrate. The FBI agent and Mr. Pym had been together in New York for 2 weeks. It was almost the July 4th holiday. To Rochford it seemed an appropriate date to party. The file, the key to his long pursuit of the mole, was almost within his grasp. For their celebration, Rochford and Mr. Pym went out on a dinner boat on the Hudson River. They could finally relax after all the tension. It was a perfect night for a cruise. Once aboard, they toasted each other. "I will be a very rich businessman," the Russian said, "and you will become a general." Mr. Pym apparently did not realize that, unlike the KGB, FBI agents do not have military rank. The band was playing loudly, so none of the other passengers on the boat could hear what the Russian and his friend were saying.